welcome to Ken Nakasone, who lives in Honolulu, Hawaii. Tell us about your medical background. Tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I'm a physical therapist, athletic trainer, and strength coach by credentialing. I've been an athletic trainer since '99. Got my strength and conditioning certification in 2000 and finished up physical therapy school in 2004 from St. Augustine in Florida. And so came back home and started a practice at the university here. And then just was thinking about doing my doctoral work here, but needed to get a little bit more clinical. So I ended up working for an outpatient physical therapy clinic where we specialize more in golf training and performance. So I ran that route with my old boss, and then just started to look more at how to work with people, how to listen to people, how to take care of what they've been complaining about. But predominantly I work under my physical therapy license, but I still do quite a bit of strength and conditioning at a local high school here. And there's not as much athletic training coverage, but they all kind of merge into one anyway.
Yeah. Tell me, how did you learn about the FDM?
In being all of the credentials and professions, I'm trying to read up as much as I can. And so years ago, maybe 7 years ago, I'm just always looking at books, and I came across your book on Kindle and looked at it. I was like, okay, I have no idea what this is. So I picked up the sample and read through the beginning, and it was fascinating because the 6 distortions in the model that Topoldos described and you described, it hit home for me because it was like, oh, it's not just a trigger point that we're going to put ischemic compression on and from there take care of everything, because that was sort of along the lines of, where some of my colleagues were going, and we were looking and finding some success, but there were some things in my practice that was questionable. It's like, okay, wait, how come I'm not getting this person better? So, seeing the 6 distortions took care of that question. And then I bought the whole book on Kindle and started reading it. And then I think I'm old enough where I need the real book in my hand. So right after that, then I just ordered the book to have it on my own. But then after that, I wanted to look at taking a seminar. And I think that was in around 2014. And so I think I happened upon the other organization's courses, and it didn't really fit my schedule at the time. So, and then I found into the AFDMA, and then they were offering the course in Maui, which was the first time I met you. Yeah. But they wasn't open to PTs at that point. So come January, Marge emails me saying, hey, we're opening up for PT. So I said, all right, let's go. And everything else there is all history.
Yeah, that's great. Well, at least one person has read the book. I'm glad to hear that.
No, I've been passing that book around. So, everyone's loving it. And I'm really looking forward to your textbook coming out later this month, I think it is.
Yeah, it's later this month. Actually, I have one of 2 hard copies that's floating around to be able to look at. So, it's
nice.
Lots of pictures. I'm pretty excited.
Oh, perfect.
Ready to put that.
Can't wait for my copies to get in.
Yeah. So, how do you think FDM changed the way you practice?
I think in terms of a lot of the techniques and systems that I've been taught along the years, it was just still looking at movement. Everything is going to center around movement. But with learning the FDM model and integrating it into the practice is, for me, I tell people it always it's an umbrella. It's from the beginning to the end of my interaction with my patients and clients. I'm thinking within the model, looking at, their body language, looking at, or listening to their verbal associations, and any type of injury process. We're trying to break down, okay, what position were you in, what movement were you doing, and with that, um, it cleared up, I think, a lot of the the gray areas, and from there it was able to help me get a little bit more concise into their problem. And then when we can kind of attack that part of it, it made the practice way more efficient, which was much more fun on both ends for my patient and clients, and even for myself. So yeah, it was great.
That leads me into the next question. What benefit do you see for the sports medicine PT with FDM?
When I talk to my colleagues nowadays, those that have taken the classes, with you folks, we have discussions about why more of us, in the athletic training and the physical therapy world, um, don't take a class like this, or, how they could benefit from something like this. But even just the first three distortions, a trigger band, a continuum, and a herniated trigger point, in the sports world, someone goes down with an ankle sprain, you know, every every person that has, should have an, anterior ankle CD. We don't take care of that, then that's where sometimes now it creates a lot more problems down the road. And so if we can immediately take care of those things, now all the return to play criteria are going to just be cleared up, pretty quickly for the most part. Now, not everyone's going to respond that way, but if we can tie into it, I mean, how many times do we have an ankle sprain, something going on with a knee or back, and it's we do some things and we try to test them out, and if they can't, perform on our test, then the athlete's not going back in. And so it's a nice perspective to be able to treat them on the sidelines, go ahead and retest them, and if we clear the distortion, the idea is that their body is functional and safe to return to play. And we see that quite a bit of times, and sometimes very sensational, and then sometimes not so sensational, but they still get back in safely, and sometimes perform even better than they did prior to that. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah. So do you see sideline use for athletic trainers with the FDM?
I do. I would jump in and be able to do that if I were on the sidelines. I think some of the roadblocks we might run into is obviously the person's training, and then their adoption of being able to do that at the time. And if they run into, dogmatic thinking of this is how I've always, taken care of sideline injuries. Um, so there's a behavioral side, I think, that we have to address in terms of, hey, this is how we can apply, the model. These are the outcomes that we would expect to see, and it's all for the betterment of the athlete, the team, and everybody. And so do we see it on the side? Do I see it on the sideline use? Absolutely. And even if we may not see all six distortions, I mean, the ankle sprain is a common one. I mean, we take care of an anterior ankle CD, take care of an ATF, CD. I mean, that's not somebody on crutches and out for a week. They might be not in the game, but they might not be out for 2 days. So there's a huge effectiveness and efficiency that can come around. Part of it is just the behavior of the practitioner to be able to know how to integrate it back into game days.
Yeah.
So that's the exciting part.
So how do you see what do you see the benefit for a novice clinician with the FDM?
Um, I think with how it's taught, and it's a model that is not eclectic in a way where it's simple, because I think a novice clinician, they see somebody reaching for the shoulder, they see somebody pointing with their finger, and if they can recognize that that is the description of a CD or a folding or a trigger band, their ability to assess is already improving. You know, now is there's more of the examination they have to learn later, and so that only is going to get them better.
Right.
But I believe in the beginning, where if we weren't paying attention to these things, that's where we sort of miss a big component of it, and then we might go down the wrong path. And so if we understand the body language, we connect that with the chief complaints, we connect that with the mechanism. The novice clinician might be on the right path. They might not be as proficient as treating, but they're on the right path. So they might actually get, you know, pretty good results with minimal amount of experience, firsthand experience. So, you know, and then when we guide them, when we, you know, kind of supervise and watch and kind of, you know, brainstorm later, I see those things come through with the people that I've worked with and have some discussions with. And so it's fun, and it also makes it fun because, well, the person gets better.
Right.
There's a huge benefit of that.
Right.
Yeah.
What about what do you see the benefit to the veteran clinician?
Oh yeah, on the other end of the spectrum, I think with the seasoned clinician or the veteran clinician, you know, we've all run into to tough patients or tough, you know, presentations, and I believe that, you know, if we look at a certain way of thinking, we might just stay down that path, you know. But if someone shows me a body language, and you know, it's even like a fascia injury, you know, when you fall on your outstretched hand, you know, if someone goes in and always kind of does a traction, oh, I think the joint's compressed and it's contracted, so I just want to stretch it out and alleviate, you know, their pressure and pain, if that was the thinking. But the mechanism is more of a compression, a refolding, and it's like, wait, I think I got to go the other way now. And so for someone that learns the model later, such as myself, those were some of the challenging things to kind of wrap my head around. Which, for me, I'm always open to listening to something new. So it's fun. Sometimes it doesn't take me as long to kind of adopt it, but sometimes it does. And so, you know, getting the understanding of the foldings and its subtypes were interesting. But I think it made the bigger difference when I did work with patients, because once I'm listening to their history, it was it's so much more efficient. You know, as soon as they tell me the mechanism, and if it is a folding, I'm like, okay, I got to go this route. And there's a lot of fail safes within the treatments,
Right.
you know, of the model. And so it's a beautiful thing. And then, you know, I think once the clinicians see that, then I think that's where the effectiveness and the efficiency of them integrating the model into their current practice just explodes at that point. You know, and it's fun. It's always fun, you know, to that
Right.
point.
Right. What challenges have
Yeah.
you encountered from integrating FDM into your practice?
I guess like what I just said, you know, is just a matter of uh, not necessarily unlearning everything that I've learned before, learning the model, but I think there's some fine tuning. You know, I think there's, you know, taking what the model concepts and now applying it to the patient in real time. And so, you know, if there's a patient I know and they're coming in with, you know, a cervical reticulopathy diagnosis, um, you know, they typically you know, FDM learning, I would, you know, look at the cervical spine, which I still do, you know, but then the thinking of what tissue, what structure, and what reasons the person has the pain and the dysfunction changes for me. And so now I had to kind of put on a different hat and think that, oh, wait, it might not just be a, you know, peripheral nerve being, you know, entrapped, or a peripheral nerve, you know, being whatever. It just could be that the surrounding tissue now has created a trigger band, and I have an approach to be able to take care of that. And so it's it's more succinct in terms of where I want to target, and I think we've all had, experiences where, I could tree the trigger band, maybe two passes along the pathway, and, their function restored 99, 100%. And it's like, is that all I had to do? And it's like, great, I'm happy. I'm sure that my patient's happy once they get past, some of the sensations from the treatment. But I sit back and I know I did it. I sit back and I'm like, what was I doing for the years prior to this? And it's, I can't say anything. I'm happy that I'm, got exposed to a lot of the concept, the model, and obviously meeting all of you folks, has just been a bigger, blessing for me, because I think, long ago, that was what I was really wanting to work with, is to work with osteopathic physicians, being in the context of me being a physical therapist in the manual therapy side. It was always something I wanted to do. Never knew how it was going to happen. And, looking back, it's I'd have it no other way.
Yeah, it's one of the things that here in Fairbanks, we've talked before, but we're really looking at trying to integrate that PT, OMM, together to make it, different philosophies united together to get a patient better, faster, and make it last. I think that's one of the things that we're looking at. I think it's a lot of potential in that model.
I think that, like you said, that last part is, how do we have the outcomes last? I mean, I think that's the real question, we're looking at, for our two professions to kind of coordinate, but also too is, what else do we know, or what else may we be missing to allow that, continuity of the outcome or the result to happen? And it's so multifaceted, but it's super interesting, because depending on the person, it might be, some behavioral things, which is not within my context specifically, but it just might be sitting down and talking to the person about how they do things. And so that opens up quite a bit of, pathways to be able to, guide them back to getting them back to wherever they want to do.
So when you look at your own practice, now that you're using the FDM and you have a kind of a varied background that brought you to where you are now, what do you see as some of the uniquenesses of how you practice?
I think a lot of it, with the uniqueness of my practice, I think comes down to, we all listen to our patients. We all, pay attention to it. But I think, in a way, it looks at it from a different lens, and from that perspective, it doesn't matter who we see, and some of my friends or colleagues, they work with certain people or certain demographics. And for me, I'm not as worried. It doesn't matter. We usually would have barriers, even, taking care of family members in Japan. I don't speak the language. So, when I do go there, they ask me to take care of something, a back or knee or hip or whatever. And usually, a family member's translating, but I'm like, can you just ask them to do this and see what's happening? The uniqueness maybe just when people come in and they listen to how much we ask questions and how we dive in deeper, and deeper. And it's not to say that other clinicians don't, but there's a lot of work on the front end, to get the clearest picture. And then from there, with my practice, I have interns, I have, some personal trainers, strength coaches, that are around. And so, they're starting to hear and see me flipping between a strength coach, personal trainer, and when somebody, oh, I have a hard time doing such and such, and I can go in and ask them, is it this or is it that? I can tweak some of the movements within the model, thinking, oh, is it feel like it's going to be an unfolding of this or refolding, or, if it's a folding distortion, then we can curtail their movements. And if they can't perform something, then I'm like, okay, here, come back on the table or have a seat on the chair, and I can treat them immediately. And then from there, retention, repattern, some motor control and motor learning, and then now have them return to that movement. And it's like, some of my personal trainer just told me the other day, she's like, yeah, my client was saying this was sore and I can't treat that. Just go see Ken. And so I took care of some of the things for her. She went back into doing her exercises and the movement cleared up. She didn't do it perfectly, but she was able to get through without the nociception and some of those restrictions. And so now as she's just kind of looking, I was like, oh, that's interesting. And that may be sort of the difference, with some populations in terms of my sports performance training side. And so I think just, flip-flopping between, what we would see in athletic training or strength and conditioning or physical therapy, it's to a point where it's like, which idea or model or learning would I bring it in from, but it doesn't matter because it's all within the context of what the model teaches.
Right,
So,
right.
in a nutshell.
So we're awful lucky to have you involved with the AFDMA, the American Fascial Distortion Model Association. And it's been an absolute joy to work with you. I've collaborated with you on many patients. You're always willing to take a email or a text consult to help me navigate.
I appreciate it. It's always fun.
Yeah, my patients love it when I get an expert opinion, and I think they all dream of coming to visit you in Hawaii.
Come on over.
So what are your hopes as an AFDMA leader? What are your hopes for the future of FDM?
Well, I think a lot of the clinicians in all the professions, we can always get better. We can always try to be more efficient. We can always try to listen to our patients more within the confines of time. I have an hour with a patient, and I know, other professions aren't afforded that luxury at times. So for me, what I would see is, or love to see is, how can we disseminate information that will be able to allow the FDM to be able to stand on its own, for people to be able to say, okay, we're in such an evidence-based practice in a lot of our professions. So if we could establish, some foundational research to be able to validate what we see in terms of the distortions, anatomically, clinically, in our clinical practice. But I think that's sometimes where it starts. I think, the case reports are great. The case studies are great. They're an N of one. There's, a lot of variability, but we have to start there, so, anatomically, what do we see in those entheses? What do we see happening there, with the technology that's around? Can we get some of those studies? These might be institutional, kind of directions that we have to go. And I know you guys have been leading the charge immensely, in the osteopathic medical schools. Excuse me, whether we could see that in a physical therapy program, in an athletic training program. What does that look like? There are some, scope of practice, some limitations maybe at that point. But can we do that within the physical therapy athletic training world? I get good reviews, from my colleagues, and some don't, and some, it's not for everyone. I get it. But those that see the benefit, I know that it would benefit more. And with the younger novice clinician, like we talked about earlier, if it gets somebody to be able to understand the clinical intuition piece of it better, then a lot of the other substance of therapy or assessment and treatments can come in and it's just that much more of an efficient practitioner, then the community gets taken care of quite a bit.
Right. So it's interesting. You talked about doing research and getting the evidence out there. I just picked up a new book. Like you, I love to read about this stuff and incorporate ideas into the framework of the model. But I picked up a book. I'm blanking on the name. I think it was Fascia and Movement or something like that. And as I'm reading the chapter titles, I realized the first half of the book is all about fascia and what we know about fascia. And then the second half of the book is that it's referencing multiple techniques that are fairly famous and trademarked. And so I thought it was interesting because they were combining not their research, but the fascia research with their own ideas and in their model. So, you know, as we look at the FDM, you could almost do a similar idea where you have, this is what we currently know about fascia. Here's how it fits in the FDM model. And I think that's, you know, that's a clever way of doing it because then you don't have to build all the ground up research about fascia. We don't have to become the fascia experts and know the cellular makeup and all that, but we could actually say, okay, now that you have this framework of knowledge about what fascia is from the science world, we're going to tell you how it fits into the FDM world.
Yep. No, I mean, absolutely. I think, you know, it's interesting because, you know, there's a lot of modalities, if you will, that or systems that had come to, you know, the physical therapy world by pure happenstance and accidents. You know, I mean, the practitioner, you know, asked somebody to do something and they interpret it differently and they're like, oh, you did it that way, but no, I feel better, you know. And it's interesting because that's where part of the clinical intuition comes in, but it's because we understand, you know, the anatomy and the physiology and pathophysiology of the body. And now how can we understand the code that the body has placed it in, you know, whether it's a pathological code, and that's why we have a restriction or a limitation. And then it's our responsibility as practitioners to be able to try to decipher that code and try to see, okay, is it just something I have to manually do, or is it actually something that the person actively has to move through? Well, now if they actively move through it, if there's compensations, we have to now affect that.
Right.
Like you said, science will say this and this and this, and then we can now try to apply that within the mix of the model. Excuse me, and then hopefully we can move forward from there, you know.
Sounds
So I'm
like we got
excited
another
about
project
that.
we got to do.
Excuse me, I think we got a lot of projects that we should work on, and I'm trying to get an army to be able to help take care of this so we can move at some good speed.
Yeah, that's definitely one of my goals, and I've been frequently said that one of the things that we didn't do as well as a young organization was capture the energy and excitement of some of the members when they had it. And some thought maybe it was we were trying to be exclusive, but frankly, I think everybody was just overwhelmed trying to do their little piece. So as that army grows, I hope that we can capture more and more of the younger people, newer people to the model's energy, and, you know, just get people involved in these projects. That's the piece that I think we've struggled with, but we're getting way better.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, being on the board and listening to, you know, behind the ropes, so to speak, it's exciting. You know, I talk to, you know, my guys here, and, you know, we talk about what things that keeps us up at night, you know, looking at the excitement of, you know, what we can do, what has the model, learning the model and meeting all of you done to be able to help us take care of our community. And that to me is my number one. You know, it's like if I can learn, you know, from, you know, somebody that has nothing, you know, they're not, you know, residents of Hawaii, but now they have an integral part in us taking care of and reaching our community. That's great. But at the same time, on the practical or practitioner side, we have to start establishing that. And I know that's going to take a lot more effort. So I'm in the game. Let's do it.
Good. Yeah, I really want to thank you for taking the time today and having this interview. We've been trying to get it together and plan it for a while.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me.
Yeah, and for anybody watching, I really respect Ken's opinions and perspective when working with patients, so much so that when we were invited to teach one of the professional baseball teams, when I had to think about how can I help connect us to the athletic trainers that we were teaching, he was my go-to. So I encourage anybody with questions about how to get performance back for an athlete or a patient that they're working with. I know he'll be willing and able to entertain questions at any point. So reach out to him, find him social media through whatever contact, but he is an absolute outstanding resource. So thanks, Ken, for the time.
All right. Thank you very much.